The man standing at the edge of Pier 19 had spent 32 years on the San Pedro waterfront. 6'4", 280 pounds of dockworker muscle, hands scarred from decades of handling cargo nets and steel cables. His name was Mick Ironside Sullivan, and everyone at the Port of Los Angeles knew him. Former merchant marine, current dock supervisor, and the toughest union steward the International Longshoremen's Association had ever seen. Mick believed in three things: hard work, union brotherhood, and the absolute certainty that waterfront labor separated real men from pretenders. San Pedro, California, Port of Los Angeles, Pier 19, March 22, 1972, Thursday morning, 5:45 a.m. The port stretched for miles along the harbor, endless rows of shipping containers, massive cranes that looked like metal dinosaurs, cargo ships from every nation flying flags that told stories of distant ports. The morning fog still hung thick over the water. Ship horns echoed across the bay. Diesel engines rumbled. The smell of salt water mixed with oil, rust, and the particular odor of international cargo, spices, machinery, raw materials from around the world. Mick's crew worked Pier 19, one of the busiest container terminals in the port. 48 longshoremen on the morning shift. They unloaded ships, moved containers, operated forklifts and cranes, handled cargo that ranged from electronics to frozen fish to industrial machinery. The work was dangerous, 20-foot containers weighing 40,000 pounds, swinging from crane cables, being stacked 6 high. One mistake meant crushed limbs or death. The crew was tight. Most had worked together for years. They knew each other's families, drank at the same bars, stood together on picket lines when negotiations got tough. This was union work, good pay, hard conditions, and a brotherhood that protected its own. Mick stood near the dispatch office, coffee in hand, watching the first ship of the day being positioned at the dock. His assistant supervisor, Tommy Chen, second-generation longshoreman whose father had worked these same docks, approached with a clipboard. "Boss, we got a situation." Mick looked up. "What kind?" "Rodriguez's nephew showed up. Says he needs work. Union sent him over with a temporary card." "Rodriguez's nephew?" Mick knew Rodriguez. Solid worker, 20 years on the docks. The kid want to follow his uncle into the trade? "Not exactly. He's not a kid, maybe 30, but he doesn't look like dock material." "What's that mean?" "He's small, maybe 170 pounds. Says he teaches martial arts for a living, but needs temporary work while his school gets established. Union rules say we have to give him a chance if he's got the card." Mick's jaw tightened. Martial arts teacher. Jesus, this is longshoreman work, not some karate demonstration. We move 40-ton containers. We work in conditions that would hospitalize most people. We're on our feet for 12 hours straight, and one mistake, one moment of weakness or distraction gets someone killed. This isn't physical work. This is industrial warfare. "I understand the risks." "Do you? Because you look like you weigh maybe 170. Most of the cargo we handle weighs more than you do. The chains we use weigh 40 pounds. The hooks weigh 20. Before you even touch the cargo, you're carrying 60 pounds of equipment." Chuck met his eyes calmly. "I'm stronger than I look." "Everybody says that. Then they..." What Mick Sullivan didn't know was that the martial arts teacher had been conditioning his body for 14 years, and that discipline, endurance, and mental toughness mattered more than size in an environment designed to break the weak. Mick assigned Chuck to work with Big Eddie Kowalski, a third-generation longshoreman who stood 6'2" and weighed 250 pounds, all of it functional muscle from decades of dock work. "Eddie, this is Chuck, new guy, Rodriguez's nephew. Show him the basics. Keep him alive. If he can't cut it, send him to me." Eddie looked Chuck over. "You sure about this, Mick? Kid looks like he belongs in an office, not on the docks." "Union rules. Just keep an eye on him." Eddie grunted, led Chuck toward the equipment storage. "First thing, you need proper gear. What size gloves you wear?" "Large." Eddie pulled out heavy leather work gloves. These aren't for keeping your hands clean. These are for keeping your fingers attached. The cables we work with can slice through skin like butter. You feel one start to slip or fray, you let go immediately. Better to drop a load than lose a hand. Chuck nodded, pulling on the gloves. Second thing, safety glasses stay on, always. Rust flakes off the containers constantly. Metal shavings from the cranes. One piece in your eye and you're blind. I don't care how uncomfortable they are, they stay on. Understood. Third thing, you watch the crane operator. When that hook is moving, you track it every second. You don't look away to check your phone, to talk to someone, to scratch your ass. That hook weighs 300 pounds and it's swinging on a cable. It hits you in the head, you're dead. Simple as that. They walked onto the active pier. The assault was immediate. The sound of machinery, diesel engines, containers being set down with massive metallic booms, men shouting coordinates to crane operators, the smell of salt water, diesel fuel, and the particular odor of cargo that had been in a ship's hold for weeks. A container ship loomed above them, Maersk Pacific painted on its hull. Hundreds of containers stacked on its deck like massive metal Lego blocks. The ship's crew worked in coordination with the dock crew, cranes lifting containers, longshoremen guiding them to precise positions on the pier. "We're working ground 3 today," Eddie shouted over the noise. "That means we're securing the containers after they're placed. Chains, locks, safety checks. You mess up and a container shifts, it can crush whatever's next to it, including people." They approached a newly placed container, a 40-foot steel box that had just been set down by the overhead crane. Eddie handed Chuck a massive chain. "Feel that weight?" Chuck lifted it. "Maybe 45 pounds. "Got it." "That's nothing. Wait until you're carrying it for the 100th time today. Your shoulders will be screaming. Your back will be begging you to quit. That's when you find out what you're made of." They worked together, securing the container. Eddie showed Chuck how to thread the chains, where to attach the locks, how to inspect for damage or shifting. The work was methodical, precise, and constant. As soon as one container was secured, another was being placed. 30 minutes in, Chuck's clothes were swotched with sweat. Not from heat, the morning was cool, but from exertion. The chains weighed more than they looked. The constant bending, lifting, securing was grinding work. Eddie watched him carefully, waiting for signs of fatigue. But Chuck maintained his pace, steady, controlled. When Eddie moved to the next container, Chuck was right there. No complaints, no requests for breaks, just work. After 2 hours, they took their first 10-minute break. Eddie's crew gathered near a container that provided shade from the rising sun. Most lit cigarettes. All drank water. "So you really teach karate?" one of them asked Chuck. Tong-Su. But what happened 3 hours later would change Mick Sullivan's opinion about the martial arts teacher and teach him something about the difference between size and capability. At 11:30 a.m., an emergency situation developed. A container being lifted from the ship started swinging in an unexpected wind gust. The crane operator tried to stabilize it, but the 40-foot box was swinging like a pendulum, each swing bringing it closer to a stack of already placed containers. If it hit, it could cause a chain reaction collapse. Men scrambled away from the danger zone. Standard protocol. When something's out of control, you clear the area and let the crane operator sort it out. But one of the younger workers, a kid named Martinez, who'd only been on the dock 6 months, was directly in the path. He'd been working between containers, headphones in despite regulations, and hadn't heard the warnings. Eddie saw it. "Martinez, move!" Martinez looked up, confused, saw the swinging container, froze. Classic panic response. His brain shut down when it should have been running. The container was 15 feet away, swinging toward him, 10 seconds until impact. Eddie started running. He was 40 feet away, wouldn't make it in time. Chuck was closer, maybe 20 feet. He didn't hesitate, dropped the chain he was carrying and sprinted, not toward safety, toward Martinez.
He hit the younger worker at full speed, driving him sideways with his shoulder. Both men went down hard, rolling across the concrete pier. They cleared the danger zone with maybe 2 seconds to spare. The container swung past where Martinez had been standing, its corner missing his previous position by less than 3 feet. The crane operator stabilized the load. The immediate danger passed. Men rushed over. Martinez was on the ground, stunned. Chuck was already standing, helping the kid up. "You okay?" Chuck asked. Yeah, Jesus, I didn't see it. I didn't hear." Martinez's voice cracked. "You saved my life." "You need to keep those headphones off. Regulations exist for a reason." Eddie arrived, breathing hard. "Kid, you just almost died. And you," he looked at Chuck, "that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. You could have both been killed." "The angles were clear. I had time to move him." "The angles were clear?" Eddie almost laughed. "You calculated angles while a 20-ton container was swinging at someone's head?" "Training. You learn to assess situations quickly, read trajectories, calculate timing." Mick was there now, having seen the whole thing from his office. "Chuck, my office, now." They walked to the dispatch office. Mick closed the door. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at Chuck. "That was stupid," Mick finally said. "Martinez would have been killed." "Martinez would have been killed because he violated safety protocols. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to keep yourself safe, not to risk your life for someone else's mistake." "That's not how I see it. How do you see it?" "The crew is a team. When someone's in danger, you help them. That's what brotherhood means." Mick absorbed this. "Brotherhood? You've been here for 6 hours and you're talking about brotherhood?" "I understand I'm new, but I watched how your crew operates, how you all look out for each other. That's what made me move. If Martinez got hurt on my watch because I stood by and did nothing, I couldn't live with that." Mick sat heavily in his chair. "You know what? You are either the real deal or you're going to get yourself killed. I haven't decided which yet. Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why do you hate that I'm smaller? Why does size matter so much to you?" Mick's jaw tightened. "Because I've seen small guys try to work the docks, seen them get hurt, seen them fail. And every time one fails, it makes the whole crew look bad, makes management think they can hire anyone, undermines the union's argument that this work requires real strength, real capability. But I haven't seen you fail." "Not yet." "Then judge me on what I do, not on what you assume I can't do." Mick stared. But the real test came during the afternoon shift, when an equipment failure created a situation that required more than physical strength. At 2:30 p.m., disaster struck. A forklift being used to move smaller cargo malfunctioned. Its hydraulic system blew, causing the forks to drop suddenly. The operator jumped clear, but the pallet the forklift had been carrying, 2 tons of machine parts, crashed to the ground. The impact caused several heavy pieces to roll toward the edge of the pier. Normally not a problem. There were barriers. But this section of pier had barriers under repair. The heavy parts were rolling toward a 15-foot drop into the harbor. "Stop 'em!" Eddie shouted. "Those parts are worth $50,000. Men ran toward the rolling cargo. Big Eddie reached the first piece, a 300-pound flywheel. He tried to stop it with his hands, couldn't get enough grip. It kept rolling. Chuck reached it 2 seconds later, but instead of trying to stop it with force, he dropped low, used his body as a wedge, back against the ground, feet against the flywheel, not trying to overpower its momentum, just redirecting it. The flywheel's path curved, stopped rolling toward the edge, came to rest against a container support. Eddie stared. "How did you—" "Leverage. I don't have the strength to stop it head-on, but I can redirect it, change its vector." Another piece, a heavy gear assembly, was still rolling. 2 longshoremen tried to grab it, couldn't. Too heavy, too much momentum. Chuck ran to intercept. This time, he didn't try to stop it or wedge it. He matched its speed, running alongside. Then his hand struck a specific point on its surface, not pushing, not pulling, just touching. The gear's rotation shifted slightly. Its path curved away from the pier edge. It rolled into a stack of dunnage lumber and stopped. The crew stood in stunned silence. "What the hell was that?" one of them asked. "Physics," Chuck said simply. "Everything has a center of gravity, a rotation point. You don't need to overpower something if you can understand how it's moving and where to apply minimal force for maximum effect." Eddie shook his head. "That's not dock work. That's some kind of martial arts magic or something." "It's the same principle. In martial arts, you learn to use an opponent's force against them, to redirect instead of resist. The principles work on cargo the same as they work on people." Mick had been watching from 20 feet away. He approached slowly. "Those parts would have gone in the water, $50,000 lost, and you saved them using martial arts principles. Using understanding of how objects move. Same thing I'd use in a fight, same thing I use when teaching. The principles are universal." Mick was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his crew. "Everyone back to work. Show's over." But as the crew dispersed, Mick pulled Chuck aside. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For assuming size equals capability, for thinking that because you don't look like a longshoreman, you can't do longshoreman work. You've proven me wrong, repeatedly." "I haven't finished the 3 days yet." "You don't need to. You're hired. Full union member if you want it. No more temporary card." Chuck hesitated. "I appreciate that, but I'm only doing this until my martial arts school is established. That's my real—" Over the next 4 months, something remarkable happened on Pier 19, and it changed how Mick Sullivan thought about strength, capability, and what made someone a real longshoreman. Chuck worked the docks 4 days a week, teaching martial arts the other days. Mick's initial skepticism transformed into respect, then into genuine curiosity. He started asking questions about martial arts, about the training methods that gave Chuck his endurance, about the principles of leverage and efficiency. One evening after the shift ended, Mick and Chuck sat on the pier's edge, legs dangling over the water, watching the sun set over the harbor. "Can you teach me?" Mick asked. "Teach you what?" "Whatever it is that lets you do what you do. I'm 53 years old, my back's shot, my knees are bad. I've got maybe 5 more years of dock work in me before my body gives out completely. But watching you, you work smarter than the rest of us, more efficiently, less strain on your body." "The principles can be taught, but they require practice, patience." "I've got patience. What I don't have is time to waste my body further." Chuck thought about this. "All right, twice a week before shift starts, 5 a.m. I'll show you basics, body mechanics, proper lifting technique, how to use leverage instead of force." "You'd do that?" "You gave me a chance when you didn't want to. That's worth something." 2 weeks later, 5 longshoremen were showing up at 5 a.m. for Chuck's informal training sessions. Within a month, 12. They learned proper breathing techniques, how to lift without destroying their backs, how to position their bodies for maximum efficiency, how to stay calm under pressure. The changes were subtle but significant. Injury rates dropped, productivity increased. The crew that had been struggling to meet quotas was suddenly exceeding them. Other pier supervisors noticed, started asking Mick what he'd changed. He'd tell them about Chuck, about the training, about the principles. Some dismissed it. Others were intrigued. One afternoon, 4 months into Chuck's time on the docks, the union president visited Pier 19. Mick showed him around, explained the changes, introduced him to Chuck. "You're the martial arts teacher," the union president said. "I am." "Mick says you've been teaching his crew, says it's made a real difference." "I've been sharing some principles. The crew's been receptive." "Would you be willing to do more? We've got 12 piers, thousands of longshoremen. If what you're teaching can reduce injuries, improve efficiency, that's valuable. to the workers, and to the union's negotiating position with management. Chuck considered this. My school's almost ready to open. This was only supposed to be temporary. We'd pay you as a consultant, not dock wages, professional training wages. You could teach at your school and consult with us, best of both worlds. Mick spoke up. Chuck, you've changed how we work, how we think about work. That's worth spreading. Chuck looked at the crew, men who'd become friends over 4 months. Men who'd 6 months later, what started as temporary dock work had transformed into a program that would change the entire longshoreman industry and both men's lives. Chuck's martial arts school opened in Torrance. It thrived, but twice a week he visited the port, taught workshops, worked with union safety committees, helped develop training programs that integrated his principles with traditional dock work methods. Mick became the union safety officer, left daily dock work to focus on training, traveled to other ports, San Francisco, Seattle, Oakland, teaching longshoremen how to work smarter, not just harder. One evening, a year after Chuck first showed up at the pier gate, they sat together in Mick's union office. The walls were covered with safety statistics, training schedules, and photographs of crews from different ports. "You know what kills me?" Mick said. "What?" "That I almost didn't give you a chance. I looked at you that first morning and decided you couldn't do the job, based on nothing but size. If the union hadn't forced my hand, I would have turned you away." "But you didn't?" "Only because I had to, not because I wanted to. And if I'd succeeded in sending you away, none of this happens. The training program doesn't exist. The injury rates stay high. Men keep destroying their bodies because that's all they know. You would have figured it out eventually." "Would I? I'd worked the docks for 32 years and never questioned how we did things, never thought there might be better ways. You showed up and changed everything in 4 months." Chuck smiled. "You changed too. That's the important part. You could have resented me, could have refused to learn. Instead, you asked questions, practiced, became good enough to teach others. That transformation, that's harder than anything I did." "Maybe, but I'm grateful for all of it, for you proving me wrong, for showing me that real strength isn't about how much you can lift, it's about understanding how to lift without breaking yourself." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, the harbor lights were coming on, ships arriving from distant ports, cranes working through the night, the endless rhythm of commerce. "You're still taking classes at my school?" Chuck asked. "Every Tuesday and Thursday. Been thinking about testing for my first belt next month." "At 54? That'll make you the oldest white belt I've ever promoted. Someone's got to show these young guys that old men can still learn new tricks." 5 years after that first shift, a labor magazine published an article about innovative safety programs, and what happened at Pier 19 became the model for ports across the country. The article documented the Port of Los Angeles' injury reduction from industry worst to industry best in 5 years. The key factor, integrating martial arts principles into longshoreman training. The centerpiece was Mick Sullivan's interview. 5 years ago, a young martial arts teacher showed up looking for temporary dock work. I didn't want to hire him, thought he was too small, too soft, too different from what a longshoreman should be. He proved me wrong on every count, not just by doing the work, though he did that better than men twice his size, but by showing us there was a different way to work, a smarter way, using leverage instead of force, understanding body mechanics instead of just powering through, staying calm under pressure instead of letting adrenaline control our actions. Chuck Norris changed our culture, and when someone changes culture, really changes it, the effects ripple outward forever. We used to have the highest injury rate in the port. Now we have the lowest. We used to struggle to meet productivity quotas. Now we exceed them consistently. And our workers, they're not destroying their bodies anymore. They're working smarter, going home healthier, extending their careers by years. All because the final word came from Chuck Norris himself in a 1998 interview about unexpected applications of martial arts training. The interviewer asked, "What's the most surprising impact martial arts has had outside of fighting?" Chuck smiled. "Longshoreman work, 1972. I needed temporary income while establishing my school. The union sent me to the port of Los Angeles. The dock supervisor, Mick Sullivan, didn't think I could handle it, thought I was too small for the work. But martial arts had taught me things that translated: leverage over force, efficiency over power, calm awareness over panicked reaction, mental discipline over physical exhaustion. I worked there for 6 months, and what started as temporary income became something bigger. I began teaching the dock crews, not martial arts forms, but the principles behind them: how to move efficiently, how to lift without destroying your back, how to stay calm when things go wrong. Mick, who'd initially opposed my hiring, became my most dedicated student, eventually co-taught with me, left daily dock work to become the union's safety officer, helped spread the program to other ports. That experience taught me something crucial. Martial arts isn't just about fighting. The principles behind it, leverage, efficiency, awareness, discipline, they apply everywhere, to any physical work, to any challenge, to life. What happened to Mick? He retired in the early 90s, lived another 5 years. I spoke at his funeral. His son works the docks now, using the same principles his father learned and taught. That's legacy. Not trophies or championships, but changing how people work, how they think, how they approach challenges, making their lives measurably better. That's what matters. The story of Chuck Norris and Mick Sullivan became legend in maritime labor circles, not because of physical confrontation, but because of transformation. A dock boss who learned that size doesn't equal capability. A crew that discovered working smart beats working hard. An industry that changed how it trained workers, reducing injuries, extending careers, saving lives. On March 22, 1972, on a pier in San Pedro, a union steward made a judgment about a small man and learned that real strength isn't measured in pounds, it's measured in principles, discipline, and the wisdom to know that how you work matters more than how big you are.